Immigration is a sticky subject for almost every country, and is especially laden with controversy in the Western world. It's a subject that can bring a lot of the dark side of human nature to the surface, but on the bright side, it can make it easier to spot the racists and avoid them. Unless you're living in Africa and are entirely of African descent, then there's a 100% chance that you are descended from immigrants, and there were probably human settlements there already when they arrived. If you're American and not entirely of Native American descent, then you're probably descended from at least a few recent immigrants, as I am. So if you're ever inclined to insult today's immigrants for not speaking English very well, or dressing funny, or having unusual but mostly harmless customs, you may want to rethink it, or at the very least narrow the focus of your objection. Today's huddled masses were once your family facing ridicule and discrimination. I hear a lot of complaints that have to do with language, and some people being up in arms that many recent immigrants have trouble with English, and can be hard to understand. Many of the people I hear complaining about this are people who speak only English themselves, and have no idea how difficult it is to learn another language, especially later in life. I started learning German in my early teens, and though I'm told by native speakers that my accent is quite good, I know that I will never be mistaken for a native speaker. Most immigrants learn English, but it's rarely going to be perfect, so either learn another language or complain about something else. I recently heard of a promotion of a Mexican-owned pizza place in Houston where you could get a special deal if you learn how to order in Spanish. Many Tea Party types got all up in arms about this, with people claiming it was somehow divisive to encourage people to be interested in their culture. Do you suppose they would be upset if it were a Swedish restaurant? No, of course the Tea Party wouldn't have cared about that. What about Arabic? Oh, well, you can bet those same people would have voiced objections to that. Well, what about Italian? Well, of course that would have been fine with them. They don't mind foreign languages unless they're foreign languages spoken primarily by brown people. There are currently millions of illegal immigrants in the United States. Most of them are gainfully employed, and some of them work in restaurants that you frequent, or fix things at your house, do landscaping, pick crops, or various other jobs that you can't do, and or would never want to do. Recently, many states have passed legislation to make it harder for businesses to hire illegal immigrants, which they are certainly authorized to do, but the stickier part of that equation that has been completely ignored is that there's never a path created to citizenship so that they could ever work legally. At one of the hotels I stay in a lot for work in Arizona, the cook was let go last year after years of service because he was an illegal immigrant, despite being an awesome cook. His replacement is the slowest cook I've ever seen in my life, and the customers don't like him. I don't know if Jose was able to get another job, but when Tea Partiers complain about some illegal immigrants being on social services, they don't seem to understand that cutting the possible work options is going to make this a far bigger problem than it is now, and hurt the children of these people, many of whom have never known life outside this country. This incredibly inhuman solution of simply making life so unbearable for people that they leave is not just the Tea Party position, but reflects the thoughts of a lot of supposedly mainstream Republicans too.
You don't deport them, how do you send them home?
Well, the answer is self-deportation, which is people decide that they can do better by going home because they can't find work here because they don't have legal documentation to allow them to work here.
I do understand that unlimited immigration is not a good idea either, and that our borders should be better protected. I would just like politicians to consider those who are already here, and the families caught in the middle, as a bigger priority, instead of pandering to the round 'em up and ship 'em back to Mexico crowd. Expand the guest worker program to reduce the pressure to cross the border illegally. Maybe craft legislation that gives a path to citizenship that includes a work requirement, and bring the huge shadow economy into the light. Less abuse of workers and more tax revenue should be the result. Ending the drug war, at least as it pertains to pot, would also be a start to reduce the violence that causes economic problems south of the border and helps drive illegal immigration. For those Americans worried about the extra competition for jobs, well, if you can't outcompete an immigrant who grew up in a shack somewhere in rural Central America, then you may want to sharpen up those job skills, or reevaluate how much of a hard worker you think you are. While politicians bicker about the issue and jockey for votes, we still have this contradictory mindset that we rely on dirt cheap labor, but don't want anyone who doesn't look or act exactly like us to live here. I think that line in the song Icky Thump by the White Stripes about this topic is very apt. You can't be a pimp and a prostitute too.